In the world of toy making, there are a lot of products that transcend play and collectible to become part of our culture, to become something beyond what they were originally intended to be. And sometimes they're because they remind us of being a child and the fun we had, and other times they're just kind of a cultural novelty, shall we say. But no pun intended, toys tend to build upon each other. See how I did that? And better toys remain and get made over and over again and become evergreen in the toy aisle. And while some come and go and some try to make comebacks but don't necessarily come back, there are others that can live on through new mediums like movies and comic books and find new global audience. One toy line in particular, the DC Superpowers line from Kenner, while it has a lot of lifelong fans, it tends to be one of those that doesn't come up all the time as one of the greatest toy lines of all time, which honestly it should. DC Superpowers not only completely revamped the action figure industry as far as action features, but it was really most kids in the 80s, it was their introduction to the DC Universe and all of the various characters. Of course, hand in hand with the hit show Super Friends, the two of them really together became this dynamic duo. Again, no pun intended. And, well, when it came time to doing a new DC toy line at Mattel, I was very fortunate to be the brand manager of this. We very much were thinking about superpowers the whole time. This is why all of the main characters really have their sort of superpowers look, if you will, versus a more modern look. I mean, some of them did get more modern looks, but we wanted to make sure we sort of checked that box. And Bill Benecke and I, Bill being the lead designer, and myself, by the way, I haven't introduced myself. I'm Scott Toy Guru Neitlich, if this is the first time you're coming to this channel. So I was the brand manager on this line, but Bill and I really worked hand in hand. We were an awesome partnership, and getting to work with someone like Bill Benecke, who is a huge toy fan and a huge DC fan, and with both of us loving superpowers, well, there's a reason you saw so much of this bleed over into the DC Universe Classics line. So much so that we even looked at the infamous cross-sell image that showed all 33 figures in the vintage line, and we made it our goal to see if we could do every single figure from Superpowers in DCU Classics. And we felt really great that we actually achieved this, and in fact overachieved it with even doing figures of the sort of long-lost Unproduced wave, which I'm not going to go into too much detail on that, but there were waves that were never produced. There's other YouTube videos that sort of share that, and Action Figure Insider did a great job highlighting how these waves were developed and what was going to happen with them. But we did want to really pay homage to this line, and it included doing figures that were created for the show and for the toy line that fans have been making customs of, and finding ways to actually do collector scale 6-inch highly articulated figures of characters like Samurai and Black Lightning and uh, Golden Pharaoh, El Dorado. In fact, they creeped into quite a few DC lines while I was managing them because, well, you can tell where my heart lay as far as what would make great action figures and what would have that sort of nostalgia kick, but also make really colorful figures for kids because, if it's sold at retail, it also has to appeal to kids. So we were always kind of curious how far we could push the line. I mean, could we put out Cyclotron and have kids actually buy him, or was he going to peg warm because people would have no idea who he is? Same thing with Golden Pharaoh. Made a very beautiful looking figure, but not exactly a character that comes top of mind unless you are a big toy fan. We also were very conscious of doing the, shall we say, superpowers version of characters. So Steppenwolf is a good example. The sort of more well-known version of Steppenwolf from the comic was in the line, but because we really loved superpowers and we wanted to achieve this goal of checking off all 33 figures, we were very conscious to also do the superpowers version of Steppenwolf. In fact, I think the only one that this didn't happen for was Orion, and that's because he wound up in the first wave. That was before Bill and I were on the line. That was pre-us. We came on board about the second and third wave. So, even the final figures, going out with a bang, shall we say, were released on Superpowers cards and in bright Superpowers colors. And I was pretty proud of this because now it's kind of common to get 6-inch action figures released on vintage style cards. But we were doing this 10 years ago before, it became trendy. And I'm really proud that we are, because it was really cool to sort of take those old toys that we grew up with and find ways to update them for the 6-inch line and really pull on those nostalgia chords and make a cool piece that actually looks great in or out of the package. Heck, we even did Green Lantern as Riddler when he was released in Argentina in the vintage line like that. All right, so back to the infamous cross-sell. So you'll see that not only did we get to the 33 figures, but there's two lines after that at the bottom, starting with Man-Bat there on the left, going all the way through Vigilante, that were not in the Superpowers line. So why are they in our cross-sell? Well, as I said, there were numerous figures designed that were going to expand the Superpowers line to future waves. And also, as I noted, Action Figure Insider, Toy Otter in particular, did a great job a few years ago of uncovering a lot of this information. So with this info out there of who was planned for Superpowers but never made it, Bill and I would often ask ourselves, how far is too far? I mean, there are a lot of fans who love Superpowers and create customs of figures in the Superpowers style. Is this something we could do? Could we, continue to do figures as if they were released in Superpowers? Or should we be looking at those characters that were set up to be in the final waves that never made it to retail? Would those be good additions to the line? And we looked at all of the material that was out there. Not just the work that Toy Otter and Action Figure Insider had done, but Tomart's Action Figure Digest did a story years ago when, magazines were a thing, and they uncovered images of not only the prototypes of the final wave, but a lot of the vehicles and play sets that were planned to be part of an expanded line that would have continued for 1 or 2 years past what the line actually did in the mid-'80s. And some of the figures are, kind of very toyetic. And we thought, well, this might work for today's kids and collectors too, if we could get them out to retail. But again, we were always questioning ourselves is how far is too far? So, characters like Man-Bat, who is probably the most A-list of the final wave Superpowers that were never made, because he actually appeared in the comics and was known. And of course, there were characters that were from the cartoon and were well known because, kids knew them from watching them weekly. So that was something to look at too. But if we did somebody like Rocket Man, I mean, would collectors even care? Would they want him in DCU Classics? Or, someone like Manhunter, yes, again, an established DC character, but if we did him in the place of someone else that was more fan-demanded. Now, we were lucky that Man-Bat was actually already done, and we had done him in the DC Superheroes line, which predated DC Universe Classics, but we did release him in Wave 9 in the brown deco, which is the deco he would have had he actually been made. This is the prototype here that somehow survived. So we were able to check off some of them in terms of they sort of just happened by fluke. Man-Bat wasn't released in DCU Classics because he was a Superpowers figure. He was released because we already had the tool, and he was released in the DC Superheroes line, which predated Mattel's full license. So we definitely got blessed by few of these sort of happy accidents. But how far could we push the envelope? I mean, we did Creeper, but could we do Silicon? Could we do, these characters that people had never heard of that weren't really part of DC Comics? At this point, Kenner was kind of making up characters to be in the line. And yeah, we really spent a lot of time talking about this and trying to decide, since slots were so valuable, and you give a slot to a character that has some heritage to a few fans, not only of Superpowers, but they have to then be aware of the Lost Waves. So if we did, Quadrex here, who would take quite a lot of tooling, that would take away tooling for a character that might be more well-known and might be more popular with mainstream DC fans. There may be Superpowers fans out there who don't even know who Quadrex is. You really have to be aware of the Lost Wave, if you will. So we'd already gotten a lot of gruff from fans for pushing the envelope. A good example was the Rainbow Lantern wave we put out with 17 or 18, something like that, memory serves. This was sort of the victim to the long toy design cycle. This wave was designed at the time when Blackest Night and Brightest Day were happening in the comic books, But because of the 3-year development cycle, by the time they made it to shelf, well, these characters were yesterday's news, and a lot of fans felt this wave was where the line jumped the shark, and we should really be focusing on sort of those top-tier characters and finding ways to keep them on shelf to get new collectors and new kids into the line, with sprinkling in some more obscure ones. So, again, Rocket Man, he was planned to be part of Superpowers. Do we do him in DCU Classics, or is that a bridge too far? How deep can we go? Can we look at foreign releases? Can we look at, we did Green Lantern as Riddler almost as a joke figure, even having the packaging in Spanish. And there's precedent for characters like Captain Ray, but he's not really known by your mainstream Superpowers audience, which is already a niche audience. So you're talking like a niche in a niche in a niche to do, these sort of, next wave Superpowers figures. And Bill and I had a lot of time to think about this because usually twice a week we had to make the drive from El Segundo to Burbank to visit our great partners at Warner Brothers. So we're basically in the car together for anywhere from 2 to 4 hours, and twice a week. And we spent a lot of these car drives talking about this and talking about just how far we could push the DCU Classic Superpowers homage, if you will. We were really excited that we got all 33 figures, and the fact that we got some of the bonus figures just by happy accident. Vigilante here, who was an early wave figure, well, he wasn't put in to be a Superpowers figure. He was actually just put in to be a cool-looking figure. It turned out that since he was one of the figures slotted in for a future Superpowers wave, as uncovered by Action Figure Insider and Toy Otter, well, it worked out. But there were some happy accidents that were a little bit more on purpose. Obsidian is a great example. A lot of fans gave, some feedback into his facial expression, that you could see his mouth, if you will, in the way he was sculpted, but that was deliberate because the card art has surfaced, again, Toy Otter and Action Figure Insider, for what the Superpowers Obsidian figure would look like. So that was deliberate. That's why he had an open mouth. But, Obsidian and Vigilante are one thing. If we were to do, Executioner, or we were to do, Silicon, who were sort of made up for the line, Bill and I spent a lot of time talking about it, and we really kind of felt
the line must be drawn here.
So while we wanted DCU Classics to be one of the greatest toy lines of all time, we knew it was taking inspiration from what had been laid down before, and that was Superpowers. We wanted to pay homage to it, but we didn't want to go a bridge too far. I hope in the end we did the right thing. It was never an easy call, and how far to go? Well, we went as far as we thought we could. I hope you enjoyed this video, and it was an insightful look of how the Superpowers line from Kenner influenced the DCU Classics line from Mattel. I was very blessed to get to work with so many passionate people who love DC toys and DC Comics. People from Warner Brothers, people from DC, and people from Mattel. It was a line made from love, and I'm glad I got to be part of it. I feel very blessed.